I'm Ellie, 27, and I was standing outside my own house with my fiancé, John, when his mother leaned in, dabbed imaginary dust off my thrift store dress, and said the words that shattered me. "You'll sign the prenup that says you get nothing. Consider it a favor we're doing for John." My fingers went numb around the grocery bag I'd brought from the food bank where I volunteer. John stared at the ground. I smiled anyway because I had been waiting for this exact moment. "If you met me last winter, you'd remember the coat, brown wool, shiny elbows, button hanging by a thread. I wore it on purpose. I also wore tired sneakers, even though I could afford the glossy leather kind that make footsteps sound like confidence. People treat you differently when they think you're barely holding it together. They talk freely. They underestimate you. And sometimes they expose exactly who they are. I'm Eleanor Grace Hart, but I go by Ellie. I'm the quiet co-founder of Hart and Wren, a tech-enabled legal clinic that helps low-income families with housing disputes. My co-founder, Ava Wren, handles the public face. I handle the messy stuff: contracts, investors, the late-night strategy calls. We built it from a card table and a second-hand printer into something that actually works. The press listed only Ava's name because she's photogenic and fearless in a way that plays well in glossy magazines. That was our agreement. My privacy mattered for reasons that would become obvious. I met John Whitaker at a neighborhood community center. He had that easy grin, the kind that makes you think life would be softer if you just leaned into it. He volunteered on Saturdays teaching coding to kids. He made silly jokes about semicolons and failed to hide how proud he was when they laughed. I liked him immediately. He liked me too, he said, because I seemed unpretentious. "Everyone in my world performs," he told me once. "You feel real." I thought he felt real too. For 3 months, we went to coffee shops that smelled like cinnamon and old books. I paid sometimes, he paid sometimes. He said his family owned a small investment firm. He downplayed it, and I let him. He met Ava briefly. She called him Golden Retriever Energy, and I laughed because it fit. Kind, eager, a little naive. When John proposed kneeling on our favorite bridge with a modest ring and shaking hands, I said yes. I meant it. I thought about the way he looked at kids when they got a problem. Right. I thought about his quiet patience when I had bad days at the clinic. I thought about the family I never had. My parents died when I was 16, and the rest of my relatives were more surname than relationship. I imagined Thanksgiving tables with laughter. I imagined becoming part of something warm. Then I met his family. His mother, Margaret, opened the door with a smile that didn't move her eyes. Her pearls were a string of rules around her neck. His father, Richard, shook my hand and sized me up like a balance sheet. His sister, Chloe, wore a dress that said she had never once bent over to pick something off the floor. In their marble kitchen, the refrigerator was bigger than the room I'd shared with Ava in college. "You work at a clinic?" Richard asked, like the word had a smell. "I do," I said. "We help people." "How?" "Noble," Margaret murmured, pouring wine. "John's always been charitable." Chloe flicked her gaze over my coat. "Is your dress vintage or old?" I said. "It's old." 3 minutes later, Chloe accidentally spilled red wine on it. Her apology sounded like laughter in a library. I went to the powder room and looked at the stain, spreading like a bruise across the fabric. When I came back, I saw the look they gave each other. The look of people who think they've identified the weakest link in the chain. I didn't correct them. 2 weeks later, the invitations for an engagement brunch went out: Whitaker letterhead, Whitaker crest. Margaret sent me a message: "Dress conservative. Our friends appreciate restraint." I showed up in a plain navy dress with scuffed flats. Across the lawn, I watched the Whitakers perform. Stories told slightly louder when new guests arrived. Compliments that felt like invoices. At the buffet table, a whisper traveled like a breeze. "She's sweet," someone said, but then the word, "poor." My ears rang. I could have ended it there. I could have told them I own 49% of a company their firm had tried to court and failed. I could have mentioned that the building 2 blocks from their office has my initials quietly etched into the cornerstone. I didn't. I wanted to know if John would defend me. He didn't hear the whisper. But during dessert, Margaret tapped a teaspoon against her glass and said, "Family is about shared values." Then she looked at my shoes. "I do hope Eleanor understands the expectations of our world." John shifted in his chair. "Mom, John," Richard said, "your mother is simply emphasizing the importance of prudence. You've always had a generous heart. That can be dangerous." I felt my stomach drop through the deck. That night, I asked John, "Do you think I don't fit?" The question tasted like fear. He wrapped his arms around me. I think they don't know you yet. It'll be okay, Yell. Will you stand up for me when it's not? I asked. He laughed softly and kissed my forehead. I will, he said. I promise. Promises are easy before they cost anything. Over the next month, I kept my coat, my sneakers, my silent background. I let his family think I was nice but simple. Margaret started dropping by unannounced to help with wedding tasks, she said. Help looked like 3 leather folders, a vendor list she'd chosen, a seating chart she'd decided, and a prenup she'd drafted. It's standard, she said, laying out the papers on my small kitchen table as if she were presenting dessert options. You'll waive rights to the family's assets. We don't want misunderstandings. I ran my finger over the embossed W on the top corner and looked at John. He stared at the tea bag bobbing in his mug. Standard, he echoed. I could feel Ava's voice in my head. Don't sign anything in a hurry. Then another voice emerged, my own, quieter but sharper. You're not signing at all. You're testing. Because there were things they didn't know. They didn't know that when I said I work at a clinic, I meant I built it. They didn't know that the pro bono lawyer who helped a single mom keep her apartment was funded by a grant I'd secured. They didn't know that 6 weeks earlier, we'd closed our Series B. They didn't know that the Whitaker firm had sent us a polite email asking to lead the round and I had politely declined. I wasn't hiding to trap them. I was hiding to see them clearly. Sometimes the truest thing someone says is the thing they say when they think nobody important is listening. The confrontation came on a Tuesday. When Margaret called and asked if she could meet me woman to woman, I suggested we talk outside my house because my living room felt like a sanctuary and I didn't want her voice in it. I wore the thrift store dress with the wine stain. I couldn't quite get out. I gripped a grocery bag of canned goods for a food bank drive. John stood beside me, restless, as his mother smoothed her glove and delivered her line. Like a stage actor who had practiced in the mirror, you'll sign the prenup that says you get nothing, consider it a favor we're doing for John. John's head drooped. Mom, Richard and I have talked, she continued, and while we support your marriage, we won't allow our son to be exposed to liabilities. Her gaze flicked to the grocery bag, then to the rip in my sleeve. You understand. I understood perfectly. I felt the old ache rise, the one that comes when someone sees your surface and decides it's your story. I also felt a strange calm, because the plan that had been a draft in my mind turned into something crisp and bright. I smiled and said, if you're so worried about liabilities, Margaret, maybe we should all read documents together. I've actually prepared a couple myself. Her eyebrows lifted. I'm not sure you Saturday, I said. Brunch, my treat. Bring Richard and Chloe. Bring your firm's lawyer if you want. She laughed lightly, as though humoring a child. How sweet. John looked at me then, really looked, and I saw a question in his eyes. I squeezed his hand. Trust me, I whispered. Saturday arrived sharp and blue. I booked the private room at the Marlowe, a quiet restaurant known for its lemon tarts and discretion. I sent the menu in advance. I signed the check before they sat down. Margaret entered like a ship, elegant, inevitable. Richard followed, phone in hand. Chloe trailed, bored in a way that makes boredom expensive. I stood. Thank you for coming. Of course, Margaret said. Shall we review the papers? In a moment, I said. I wanted to introduce someone. I gestured, and Ava walked in, radiant in a black blazer, the kind that makes people sit up straighter. Margaret blinked. And you are? Ava Wren, she said. Pleasure. Richard's phone stilled. He knew the name. I've asked Ava to co-host, I said, sliding 2 folders onto the table. Because transparency matters. Margaret smiled tightly. Eleanor, this is family business, it is, I said. Which is why it's time you meet all of me. Ava opened the first folder and placed it in front of Richard. It was our Series B term sheet, signed, dated, funded. His firm's letterhead was not on it. Richard's jaw did something interesting. Hart and Wren, he read. Your co-founder and majority shareholder, I said softly. Hello. Chloe's chair squeaked. Margaret laughed. High and light. You must be joking. I wish I were funny, I said. But I'm practical. Ava slid the second folder across. Inside were deeds. One for the building where our main clinic sat. Another for a smaller property 2 blocks from the Whitaker's office. Margaret's smile vanished like a blown-out candle. This is elaborate. It didn't start elaborate, I said. It started with a card table. It became elaborate when people like you assumed you could decide my worth for me. Richard cleared his throat. Why the secrecy? Because I wanted to know if John loved me for me, I said, looking at him. And I wanted to know if the people who would become my family understood kindness without a price tag. John's eyes were glassy. Ellie. I didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. Margaret reached for poise and came up empty. Well, this changes things. We were merely being cautious. I'm sure we can come to a more equitable agreement. I let silence stretch. Let it make a shape around us. Then I said, Margaret, the prenup you brought would have me walk into your house already less than your son. It wasn't cautious. It was contempt dressed as prudence. Richard bristled. That's unfair. What's unfair, I said, is teaching your son that love is an asset class. Chloe rolled her eyes. Everyone has prenups. I don't mind prenups, I said. I mind the terms. And I mind the attitude that came with them. The room simmered. I turned to John. I love you. But I won't marry into a family that confuses control with care. So here's what happens now. I'm not signing your prenup. If you still want to get married, we'll draft one together, mutual, respectful, protecting both of us. No punitive clauses. No, you get nothing. And before any wedding, your family apologizes publicly, privately, or both for the way they treated me. If they won't, then we're done. Margaret inhaled as if the air had insulted her. Richard said, This is extortion. This is boundaries. I replied. John looked at his mother, then at me. I'll talk to them, he said quietly. No, I said. Choose now. Time is a stern teacher. It teaches you who will stand with you when it's costly. John swallowed. Mom, Dad? His voice shook. You were wrong. Chloe snorted. Oh, please. He turned to her. You spilled wine on her dress. It was an accident. No, he said, and his voice steadied. It wasn't. Margaret stood, spine rigid, pearls bright. Jonathan. He flinched at the full name but didn't look away. Mom, I love her. I'm marrying her. We'll write our own prenup. If you can't accept that, I'm sorry. It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't a movie. It was messy and human and exactly what I needed. A line drawn, not with anger, but with courage. Margaret stared at him. Something old and sharp in her gaze slid away. She sat. She pressed her lips together, then exhaled. Very well, she said, sounding like the words scraped her throat. We misjudged you, Eleanor. I'm not asking for your approval, I said. I'm asking for your respect. Richard rubbed his temple. Our lawyer will review terms. Our lawyer, I said, will be a woman named Grace Patel, who specializes in equitable agreements. She'll send a draft. If you alter it to be punitive, we'll walk. Ava tapped the table lightly. And for clarity, Hart and Wren will never take money from Whitaker Capital. That ship has sailed. I watched Richard absorb that. A small, almost imperceptible nod. Scorekeeping recalibrated. We finished brunch quietly. Lemon tarts arrived and sat untouched. After, in the parking lot, John leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. I'm sorry, he said, for not speaking sooner. I kept thinking I could smooth it over. I touched his cheek. I know, but smoothing isn't standing. I'll earn back your trust, he said. You just took the first step, I replied. I didn't want spectacle for the sake of it. I wanted transformation and, if I'm honest, a little justice. The Whitakers had a reputation for hygienic deals, a polite phrase for squeezing people who couldn't afford lawyers. I couldn't change their history, but I could make sure our future was different. Grace drafted the prenup, clean, mutual, protective. It safeguarded both our premarital assets, laid out fair spousal support if either of us stepped back from work to raise children, and included a clause that required charitable commitments from both parties. As part of our marital estate, money set aside annually for community programs. Radical kindness in writing. I emailed the draft to Richard and CC'd Margaret and Chloe. I expected a redline bloodbath. Instead, I got a 2-line reply. Received. Will review. Then came the board gala. Every spring, Hart and Wren hosted a benefit to fund eviction defense. Ava wanted me to take the stage this year. I said no. She said, then at least run the donor outreach. I could do that. I sent invitations to everyone, including the Whitakers. Ava arched an eyebrow. War or peace? She asked. Accountability, I said. The night of the gala, chandeliers sparkled like sugar. Volunteers from the clinic wore their best, but you could still see the places where dignity had been repaired with thread. The program included client stories, a short film, and an auction of simple things art from kids in our after-school program. A weekend at a lake cabin donated by a judge with a soft heart. The Whitakers arrived late. Margaret wore emerald green. Richard wore calculation. Chloe wore boredom again, but tonight it was uneasy. When the program started, I stood backstage and watched the film roll. Single mothers talking about not sleeping on buses. Grandfathers talking about keeping a garden patch for tomatoes. Kids talking about pencils and quiet rooms where homework is possible. I saw Margaret dab at her eyes and look annoyed with herself for it. Then Eva did something she hadn't told me she would do. She stepped to the mic and said, "Tonight, you haven't seen much of our co-founder Ellie Hart, the backbone of this clinic. She doesn't like the spotlight. But our mission is built on seeing people clearly. So tonight, we're going to do that." A photograph flashed on the screen. Me at 20, hair in a messy bun, surrounded by file boxes. The crowd murmured. Another photo. Me at a courthouse bench, heads together with a woman clutching paperwork. Another. Me on a folding chair, writing grants with a space heater aimed at my knees. Nothing glamorous. Just work. Ellie has a habit of showing up when nobody's looking, Ava said. She also has a habit of testing systems to see if they're just or merely convenient. I swallowed, heat blooming in my cheeks. I hadn't planned to be part of the show, but I understood why she did it. She was pulling a thread through the evening, recognition as remedy, truth as light. Ava gestured to the front row. "We're honored tonight to have families who've joined ours," she said. John Whitaker is among them, and I'm grateful to witness a man choosing integrity over inheritance. The spotlight found John. He looked startled, then proud. "We're also honored to have the Whitaker family here," Ava continued. "I hope we all leave changed, myself included." Later, during the paddle raise, I saw Margaret lift hers. Richard blinked. She didn't look at him. 10,000, she said, voice steady. I exhaled, not triumph, but a tremor of hope. After the program, I found Margaret near the dessert table, staring at a photograph of a family in a small kitchen like mine. She saw me and straightened. "I don't like being manipulated," she said. "I don't either," I replied. "That's why I wore a coat with holes." She looked at me for a long time. "I was cruel." "Yes," I said. "I was afraid," she added, quieter. "I know," I said, and meant it. "Fear can make people build castles out of people." She let out a breath that seemed to have been held since childhood. "I can sign the agreement as written." She paused. "And I can apologize. Properly." She glanced at John across the room. "He loves you. I want to deserve to be in your family." This wasn't the revenge I had pictured in my angriest nights, but it felt better. It felt like the shape of something repaired. A week later, Chloe asked to meet for coffee. I expected snark. Instead, she looked like someone who'd slept in glitter and woken in someone else's dress. "I'm pregnant," she blurted, then clapped a hand over her mouth. "God, I didn't mean to say it like that." I blinked. "Okay." She laughed helplessly. "With a man my parents will hate. He's a photographer. He lives with 3 roommates and a Great Dane. He's kind." I waited. "I've been awful to you," she said, eyes wet. Because I was terrified that if I admitted I liked someone they wouldn't approve of, they'd cut me off. I wanted to be on the right side of the rope. I saw her at the brunch, the wine glass accidentally tipping. I pictured fear in a silk dress. "What do you need?" I asked. "A friend," she whispered. "Or a plan." I leaned in. "Okay," I said. "Both." Revenge shifted then from spectacle to strategy. We would change the Whitaker family by sneaking in kindness through every door they left unguarded. I connected Chloe with our clinic's family counselor. I introduced her to a maternity care nonprofit. I stood beside her when she told Richard and Margaret. There were tears. There were slammed doors. And then there were calendars with sonogram appointments written in careful pen. When Chloe accidentally spilled water on my dress at a small family dinner a month later, she jumped up with napkins and genuine panic. "I'm so sorry, oh my God." Reflex, she babbled, and we both burst out laughing. Old scenes rewritten. Old injuries rinsed. The day we signed the prenup, Grace laid the document on a conference table as if it were a treaty between countries who'd finally remembered they shared a border. Richard scanned, lawyer beside him. Margaret read every line. John held my hand, clause by clause. It honored what we'd built separately and what we were promising to build together. It set money aside each year for the clinic and for causes John chose. It established that marriage, for us, would be a partnership, not a purchase. When the last pen lifted, Margaret didn't look triumphant or trapped. She looked tired in a way that invited softness. She stood, smoothed her skirt, and said, "Eleanor, Ellie, I am truly sorry for how I treated you." Her voice didn't wobble. "I measure people by the wrong rulers. I'm trying to learn new ones." She glanced at Chloe's small belly. "I have reasons." "I know," I said. She stepped forward like the floor might slide. "Welcome to the family." I nodded. "Thank you." After, John and I walked out into the cold sunshine. A street violinist was playing something that made the air ache. John kissed my knuckles. "We did it," he said. "We're doing it," I corrected. "It's a verb." He laughed. "I love you." "I love you too." We married in a garden behind the Marlowe, under a canopy of lights that made everything look like a promise. Margaret wore a blue dress soft enough to forgive. Richard gave a toast about grit, awkward, earnest, and better than I'd expected. Chloe waddled adorably and cried at the vows. Ava danced with the caterer's aunt and made everyone laugh. Our clinic staff filled a table and cheered when the band played a song we all loved during late-night filing binges. When it was time to toss the bouquet, I didn't. I walked it over to Chloe and tucked it into her hands. "Rewrite everything," I whispered. She nodded, tears in her smile. Later, with my head on John's shoulder, I thought about the coat with its shiny elbows, the way it taught me a kind of X-ray vision. And I thought about how revenge had started as a blade and ended as a pen crossing out old clauses, writing new ones, forcing apologies into daylight and invitations into the future. People will tell you that money tells the truth. I think it tells a truth, one about fear and scarcity and who we think we have to be safe. But character tells another truth, quieter and more stubborn, who we become when nothing is at risk but our pride. The week after our wedding, I donated the coat. I tucked a note in the pocket. "You are more than who they think you are. Write your own terms." I hope someone finds it. If my story made you feel anything, anger, hope, or just the urge to set your own terms, like this video so it reaches someone who needs it. Subscribe for more true-to-life stories about power, love, and the bravery it takes to choose both. And tell me in the comments, what ruler are you done letting other people use to measure you?